Welcome back. Arizona Senator Mark Kelly is the latest Democrat to find himself at the center of an investigation by the Trump administration, this time by the Department of Defense. The Pentagon is investigating the retired Navy captain for alleged misconduct for his part in a video of Democratic lawmakers urging service members to not follow illegal orders. The probe comes just days after President Trump accused Kelly and those other Democrats in the video of sedition. For more on this, let's bring in MS Now congressional reporter Michael Schnell and Kevin Barron, former executive editor at Defense One and president of Elevation Global Strategies. Michael, can you just boil it down? What are the specific allegations against Senator Kelly?
Yeah, so essentially what the Pentagon is accusing him of is military misconduct. So he is, as you mentioned, a retired Navy pilot. He retired at the rank of captain. And according to the law, you can then recall retired officers and have them go through a court-martial if there are some of these allegations against them. So, of course, this stems from that video that 6 Democratic senators had published last week, informing members of the military that they should not and do not have to follow illegal orders. Now, of course, that is the law, so they were reiterating the law, but it caught the ire of President Trump, prompting him to say that they're guilty of sedition, saying that it should be punishable by death, and even at one point reposting a post that had said that people should be hanged for that. So now the Pentagon getting involved, saying it's going to be opening this investigation into the circumstances, but Senator Kelly, very defiant in the wake of these charges and these allegations. He told our colleague Rachel Maddow last night that he will not be silenced. Take a listen.
I'm not going to be silenced here. Is it stressful? I've been stressed by, things more important than Donald Trump trying to intimidate me into shutting my mouth and not doing my job. He didn't like what I said. I'm going to show up for work every day, support the Constitution, do my job, hold this administration accountable. Hold this president accountable when he is out of line. That's the responsibility of every U.S. senator and every member of Congress.
Now, Anna, essentially the Pentagon says that actions that interfere with loyalty, morale, good orders, and discipline are not allowed. So that is the allegations that we're looking at right here. But as you just saw, Senator Kelly very defiant in the wake of these allegations.
Kevin, we have seen how President Trump has used loyalists in the DOJ to go after perceived enemies. But members of the military face a different justice system, right? How does it work in this case? And are there any guardrails?
Well, there are. And the military has its own unique relationship with the entire civilian government, which I think is the real core of this issue. 3 points I'd like to make. One is it's not without controversy that Mark Kelly and the other members of Congress made the statements that they did, even if they're just restating law and saying, you're not supposed to follow an illegal order. The fact that they said it is a controversial and incendiary thing in the military community. And they knew that. That's why they did it. The second point, I think, though, is why are we asking 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old enlisted folks to defend democracy, if that's what you're worried about, and not the very large number of 65-year-olds with a lot of stars on their shoulders who are silent right now? It is deafeningly silent out there when it comes to the cabal of retired generals. But there's a reason for that, too. The most recent chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, C.Q. Brown, who was fired in the last month, said at the Council of Foreign Relations, the military needs to keep their head down, stay focused, and follow the orders of this administration. This is a lawful administration, lawfully elected. Unless it is an illegal order. So it's a conundrum, but it's not without controversy. The last thing I'll say is I think it's very delicate, and it's a much more delicate than Twitter lets out leaves room for. I guess I'll say.
Well, of course, the military has always sort of prided itself in being apolitical, right? It doesn't serve one party. It serves the country and is meant to represent and protect all of America. Kelly's a retired Navy captain versus being, separated. So he's not former Navy captain. That's a distinction here because he could, and in order to face these potential allegations in a military court, he'd have to be recalled to service. Kevin, how unusual would that be?
Extremely unusual, and I would be stunned if it actually gets that far. I can't imagine anybody in the JAG Corps looking at evidence going, "Oh yes, we should do this." I mean, it's free speech. He said what he said, and I think I would be stunned. Let's put it that way.
Michael, how are Senator Kelly's colleagues reacting to this? Are any Republicans speaking out?
Yeah, there actually are some. So first, for Democrats, as you'd expect, they are incensed by this new development from the Pentagon. We heard from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, who said that Senator Kelly has more courage, integrity, and patriotism in his lifetime than Secretary Hegseth could have in multiple lifetimes. So right there, taking aim at the secretary directly in the wake of these allegations. We also heard from Senator Ruben Gallego, who's Senator Kelly's colleague, Democratic colleague from Arizona. He let some expletives fly with this, saying, F you and your investigation. But as you asked, we actually are hearing from at least one Republican who's also criticizing this, and that's Congressman Don Bacon. And I'll note, he's a Republican from Nebraska. He's more of a moderate member, and he's actually retiring at the end of this term. So he sort of has a little more leeway, some would say, to criticize the administration. I want to read to you what he said. He called this amateur hour coming from the Department of Defense. And interestingly enough, Anna, he said that he thought that the video from the Democrats was unnecessary and foolish, but he continues, the threats of sedition charges and courts martial in response are also crazy. Let's show some common sense and restraint. So there is some pushback from the Republican side. Of course, that's larger on the Democratic side, but it is bipartisan criticism.
The president just last week was posting that the Democrats in that video should be arrested and put on trial. And I don't think we should lose sight of that. The Secretary of Defense posted yesterday that the video was despicable and reckless and false. So there's a lot of talk at the top, Kevin, that you are hearing if you're in the military. Could those comments come into play when it comes to any kind of military proceeding going forward? And what's the impact on people who are currently in the military? Should they think that there is an illegal order given? What are they going to do?
Yeah, immediately after Hegseth posted that, there are several defense reporters are posting, well, there's something called undue command influence. And by posting that, you've now tainted your own case, which is, par for the course for this administration. I think, it's important to remember Donald Trump has called for General Mark Milley to be executed. This is not the first time that he's made this kind of a statement. He hasn't walked that back. It's still out there. They pulled General Milley's security detail, as soon as he came to office, along with a lot of their other political enemies in the national security space. So this is par for the course for them. I think there are there's some guidance from some retirees out there. Mark Hertling has a piece out today making the interesting point that, enlisted men and women in the service take a different oath than the officers do. The enlisted corps is not supposed to question their orders. They're supposed to trust that those are lawful orders. The officer corps is the one that's supposed to be the buffer so that these 18-year-olds don't have to make that legal call, right? There was a time at the height of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars where every single drone strike was getting approved by Pentagon lawyers. There are thousands of Pentagon lawyers out there. So this is not something that should fall to a decision of any junior enlisted person in the ranks. I would trust any member of the armed forces, any junior enlisted person, to do the right thing legally, more than I would, frankly, the Supreme Court of the United States, which has given immunity to the president. So, let's take this for what it is.